Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Was Terribly Betrayed and Kills Everyone One by One Part 1. Before we start, please go support Zack-Oblivion for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Issei is a male in this story. Prologue. Issei Hyoudou, the one who was once considered the strongest sekiryuutei, the one known as the hero of the factions, the Op-Eye Dragon, was now in the deepest, darkest part of the Gremory clan's dungeons. What was in that cell was not even a shadow of what that boy who gave his life for others once was, not now. What was left was an empty shell. The boy was in a more than deplorable state. His body was completely covered in scars, bruises, dried blood stains everywhere. He had no eyes, instead there were two sockets from which small drops of blood came out in the form of tears. He was missing an arm, more specifically the arm where his old companion Drake the Welsh dragon once lived. His left leg was also missing. His jaw was broken. The brown-haired boy was extremely thin, with his skin marking his bones, but he was also missing parts of his skin and flesh, leaving his bones exposed. But the damage was not only physical but also mental. The boy was totally psychologically destroyed. The young brown-haired boy's sanity was destroyed, leaving only a great and infinite madness. Issei haha, this is incredible haha, after so many beautiful moments we had haha, so many adventures, so much happiness haha, all that trust, all that love haha haha, I even died for them. They replaced me haha, and they betrayed me. And haha, everyone is going to pay with their lives haha. These were the thoughts of a deplorable brown-haired boy. Well, it was seen that, despite having a broken jaw, he gave a small and almost imperceptible smile, but it reflected hatred, resentment and above all madness. Join me in this story, the story of the birth of the most powerful being of all, the one who knows no limits, the one whose power is infinite, and his name is the Absolute. End of prologue. Chapter 1. The darkness that was born in the light. Issei Hyoudou, known for being the strongest sekiryuutei of all, fiancé of the heiress of the Gremory clan and her pawn, the beautiful high-class devil Ria's Gremory. After thanks to her help they managed to defeat Rizavum and reseal the trihexa. Peace had returned to the factions. Everyone enjoyed this beautiful period of peace. This young man had a beautiful future ahead of him. Next to all the members of his harem and with his friends supporting him, the future looked very bright for this young brown-haired boy. However, all that changed the day that guy appeared. His name was Arata. He was a high-class devil. He had black hair and grey eyes, apart from being very handsome in the opinion of women. But it also turns out that he was an old childhood friend of Ria's. When the Redeed saw him again, she was more than happy. Ria's introduced her old childhood friend to her entourage and also took him to the Gremory mansion. He was received with great joy by Ria's parents at the same time as her brother, and his entourage quickly began to trust him and get along very well. However, there was someone who didn't trust Arata in the slightest, and that was Issei. He felt something bad about the black-haired man. His dragon instinct told him so. The brown-haired man tried to warn the others not to trust Arata, but they simply ignored him, believing that he was simply jealous. But Issei did not give up. He kept telling them that this guy was not trustworthy. Of course, everyone was starting to get fed up with his attitude. The days passed and all the people began to distance themselves more and more from Issei. He had a very bad feeling, as did Drake. The Welsh dragon was supporting his carrier all the time. His instinct also told him that this guy was not planning anything good. The brown-haired man was beginning to feel quite sad, seeing how everyone was moving away from him. But what hurt him the most was seeing how the women he loves were moving away from him. Issei. Currently, it had been 3 months since that bastard Arata appeared. I don't like that guy at all. Partly because sometimes I see him with an evil smile, which only makes my suspicions increase. But while I was returning home after buying some gifts for the girls, they were beautiful engagement rings. I decided that day to stop being so pathetic and finally tell the girls how I feel. I was very happy and excited. I had to work hard to buy them since they had been too expensive. I had to work for many months to have enough money, but I knew that so much sacrifice would be worth it. Then Issei. The brown-haired man was walking happily back to his home. However, he was surprised to see how in front of him, a large group of approximately 60 elite guard demons with armor and spears appeared, who upon seeing him pointed their weapons at him while looking at him with hatred and disgust. The EMON-1 Issei Hyoudou is under arrest for the murder of the royal advisors, the destruction of an entire city, and attempting to assassinate Arata-sama. Now he will be taken to the underworld for trial, he shouted, looking at the brown-haired boy with anger. Issei couldn't believe what he just heard. Issei. What are you saying? I haven't killed anyone, he exclaimed, more than indignant. The EMON-1, don't lie, your words have no value at this moment, the same demon shouted again with a tone that was overflowing with anger. Brave mate, you have to escape, he shouted, worried for his partner. The brown-haired boy would take out his demon wings, but just before he could even start to fly, a magic circle appeared beneath him that had the symbol of the fallen angels, from which a large electric shock came out that left the brown-haired boy seriously injured. Now Issei found himself on the ground, with the demons pointing their souls at his neck, implying that if he moved they would kill him, and he could see in their eyes that they were serious. The brunette from his position could see how the bag containing the girl's rings had fallen, however it was stepped on by the foot of a demon. This action made the brunette very angry. However, the demons without wasting time put handcuffs on him and also special chains, which were on his wrists, ankles and even neck, which prevented him from using his sacred gear. After this, the demons along with a chained Issei quickly disappear into a magic circle. It must be said that there was no one in the streets. Upon arriving in the underworld, the demons carelessly dragged the boy to a castle where not only the four mass were gathered, but also the other faction leaders, including the leaders of the angels, fallen, Nordic and Yokai, but there were also several of the demonic clans, such as the Gremory, Citri, Phoenix, Bale clans, among others. The moment he entered the room with the chained chestnut, everyone present without exception looked at him with a cold gaze that only reflected hatred and displeasure. Once the brown-haired boy was in front of the leaders, one of the guards gave him a strong blow behind the knee, forcing him to fall to his knees. Surzich's Issei Hyoudou, you are accused of murdering the counselors of the underworld, apart from having destroyed a city and trying to kill our best soldier, young Arata, he shouted, looking at the brunette coldly. Issei Surzich's, this must be a mistake, I would never, he shouted, but was interrupted when he received a blow to the stomach from one of the elite soldiers. Demon, shut your mouth now, you damn bastard, I yelled at him furiously. Everyone present looked at this coldly, as if they didn't care, until the red-haired man spoke. Surzich's. All those in favor of locking up Issei Hyoudou, raise your hands, I shout for everyone in the room without exception to raise their hands. Everyone had a serious and cold look on their faces at the boy, however a certain black-haired man had an evil smile that no one noticed. The brown-haired boy was in shock at this, they weren't even giving him the chance to defend himself. Surzich's Issei Hyoudou, from now on your engagement with my sister is annulled, apart from the fact that you will no longer be the pillar of the factions, and the pawn pieces will be taken away from you, along with the Welsh dragon, he exclaimed without a hint of emotion. The brown-haired boy was held by a pair of guards, who dragged him carelessly until they reached a portal. They threw the brown-haired boy into the portal as if he were a sack of potatoes. Upon crossing the portal, Issei realized that he was in a cell with several chains and walls that looked old and deplorable, as well as having several cracks. Issei saw how the four mass appeared in front of him looking at him with hatred and displeasure. Before the brown-haired boy could say something, all the chains that were in that place were surrounded by a red aura and then launched at the poor boy. They dug into his hands and feet and then spoke forcefully, leaving him suspended on the wall. Surzich's, you are currently in the deepest part of the Gremory dungeons. It is the most secure prison in the entire underworld, apart from the fact that those chains drain all your magic, leaving you totally defenseless. Well, let's begin with the extraction process, he said without showing any emotion. The green-haired Mao took a step forward, he extended his hand to the brown-haired boy, where 8 small green magic circles appeared on the boy's body, and an extra one in the middle of his chest, only this one was bigger than the others, so that immediately after the 8 pawn pieces began to come out of the brown-haired boy's body. Only then a bright green sphere came out of the brown-haired boy's chest, this being Drag. All this, while Issei let out heart-rending screams that only reflected pain in its purest state. Ajuka, this fact, he said, serious and cold. The brown-haired boy had his head down, he didn't say anything, he was in shock, unable to understand what had just happened. All the people he once loved and defended with his own life now hated him, and not only that, but they also took his partner away from him and locked him up. The boy thought that things couldn't get any worse, but he was wrong. Time skip. Time had passed and Issei was still in the Gremory dungeon. He had been in that horrendous place for more than 10 years, and during this time all those he once loved began to torture him in the worst ways. The boy was cut by the swords of Kiba, Zenobia and Arena, used as a punching bag by Kaneko. Asia hit him with a sword given to her by the Gremory Knight. Riaz attacked him with her power of destruction, while Lakeno electrocuted him. However, that was only the beginning. A few months after the Gremory entourage began torturing him, they quickly got bored and left him at the mercy of the other prisoners of the dungeon. During the rest of his stay in that place it was simply horrible. The other prisoners beat him to the point of breaking his bones, they cut him. On one of those many horrible days they tied him to a chair and ripped out his fingernails and toenails. However, everything got worse when Arata appeared one of those days and joined in the torture of the poor chestnut, helping the prisoners to torture him. One of the darkest days that Issei suffered during that time in the dungeon was when one night Arata arrived, along with a number of prisoners, to his cell, and the black-haired man used a strange spell to turn Issei into a woman. What happened that night was simply horrible. Issei in that woman's body. He was raped all night. All the prisoners along with the black-haired man graped poor Issei all night long. That was undoubtedly one of the worst days in Issei Hyoudu's life. However, there were other days that were just as bad, or I would even dare say that they were worse. Another day Issei heard footsteps approaching his cell. At first he believed it was Arata or one of the prisoners, but his surprise was great when he saw his ex-fiancée Aria's Gremory at the door of his cell looking at him coldly. The brown-haired boy for a moment had hoped that they would get him out of there, that things would be like before. However, these hopes were destroyed into 1,000 pieces when the Redeed told him that both she and the others had given themselves body and soul to Arata, having their first time with him. With this information, Issei could only break down in tears. The boy cried like he had never done before in his life. Seeing him in that state, Rias for a second felt sorry and sadness for him, but he ignored those feelings and quickly left that horrible place. Another day in which Issei suffered a lot was when Arata arrived at his cell, but he was not alone. The black-haired man had Issei's parents. The brown-haired man opened his eyes in shock when he saw his parents there. He screamed at Arata not to do anything to them, but those pleas fell on deaf ears. The brown-haired boy watched helplessly as the black-haired boy tore off his mother's limbs while she screamed in pain. Issei wanted to do something to save her, but the chains he had drained his energy, but he still struggled uselessly to try to free himself. The brown-haired boy's father tried to help his wife, but every time he got closer he was sent flying into a wall. Thanks to a blow from the evil boy, the woman continued screaming until the black-haired boy ripped her head off. Fed up with her screams, the brown-haired boy cried with anger and helplessness as he saw his mother die in front of him without being able to do anything. And the same fate befell his father, who died being disemboweled by Arata. Since that horrendous night, the boy's mind was breaking with each torture he received. His sanity was slowly destroyed, while from the depths of his heart began to follow a feeling that began to invade every cell of his body. That feeling is hatred. Hatred towards the factions. Hatred towards the hitches he had as partners before. Hatred towards the damn bastard Arata, but above all things, hatred towards supernatural beings. Why did he pay him for that? Did he deserve it? Had he done something and this was his punishment? Why did these kinds of things happen to him? Those and more questions were in the boy's mind. After Issei spent 2 years in that horrible dump, the prisoners along with Arata decided to kill him once and for all. There was no longer any point in torturing the boy any longer. He was already completely broken, so once night fell, Arata along with all the prisoners went to the brown-haired boy's cell to begin the fun. During the time they tortured the poor boy, they stabbed him, cut him, beat him to the point of breaking almost all of his bones, adding that they also broke his jaw. They gang-raped him. It should be noted that before that Arata turned him into a woman with the same spell as before, but not satisfied with it, they began to break his fingers and toes. Then yanked off his left arm where he previously had drag and proceeded to do the same to his left leg. To finish, the black-haired man took a sharp knife and slowly stuck it in both of the brown-haired man's eyes to later remove them without hesitation, leaving a trail of tears of blood in the places where his eyes once were. Once they finished having fun with him, they left the cell, leaving a brown-haired boy in a more than deplorable state. This had been the end of Issei Hyoudou, right? We can see the brown-haired boy floating in his mental space, only this was not the usual dark space, but now he was on his knees shedding tears in torrents while he was in a kind of bubble, which was floating in an infinite void. "Issei, please, someone help me," she said between sobs, not expecting to receive an answer. "No one can help you, you will have to face this alone," exclaimed a mysterious voice that seemed to come from everywhere. "Issei, who is it?" I asked, confused. The brown-haired man raised his tear-stained face and saw with surprise how in front of him there was a strange humanoid-shaped silhouette made of red energy with bright wide eyes. "You will have to face this alone," he said in a calm voice. "Issei. But what should I do?" "I don't know," he said, but was interrupted by the strange entity. "Will it be okay if we let it all end here?" I asked, this time in a more serious tone of voice. "Issei. No, there are still things I want to do," he said, looking at the strange figure. "And what are you waiting for to do them? Remember that," she said while leaning over and looking him in the eyes. "Issei. Remember?" he exclaimed in confusion. At that moment, the brown-haired boy remembered all the misfortunes that had happened to him throughout his life, but above all the betrayal and pain he suffered at the hands of supernatural beings. Issei opened his eyes in surprise at these memories. The boy stood up as his tears disappeared, revealing a serious expression on his face that reflected a coldness and madness that seemed to have no end, and his landscape turned into a crimson-red sky with black clouds. "Well, the rest should be easy for you," he said in a tone of voice that denoted a little happiness. "Issei. But who are you?" he asked, confused. "Adios. Issei. Wait," he said, trying to reach it with his hand. The figure began to move away from the boy until it disappeared, leaving a confused Issei, but the brown-haired boy ignored this fact and then looked up at the blood-red sky in his mental space. Issei, this is a new beginning, these powers surpass any god of any religion, now no one will be able to stop me, and those who dare to stand in my way will be destroyed. He exclaimed with a voice full of madness and hatred. At that moment a new god had been born. Chapter 2. Truth, Pain and Blood. We can see a group of elite demons heading to the deepest level of the Grimoire dungeons. The reason why they were heading there was to free the former sekiryuutei, but to better explain this we must go back in time. Flashback 4 hours. In the castle of the Grimoire clan you can see a large number of demons, angels and fallen ones, all of them were gathered since Ria's Grimoire, the Crimson Princess of Ruin, was going hunting with Arata. The red-haired girl was happier than ever, she was dressed in her wedding dress looking really beautiful, everything was going wonderfully. Thanks to Michael they managed to have the wedding in the purest human style, hell there was even a father and all that. Before anyone tells me why I put a father in a hellish wedding, the answer is because I want to, because I can and because I feel like it. Everything was perfect, but when the father asked who was opposed, it was a huge surprise for everyone that the only one in the entire room who opposed was Arata himself. Everyone in the room was very confused and surprised at the same time. However, they came out of their surprise when they saw how the black-haired man gave a strong blow loaded with magic to Ria's, sending her directly to the ground. Seeing this, Surziches became enraged. Surziches? Damn you, why did you attack her? You were supposed to love her, he shouted in anger. However, the only thing he received in response was a mocking and psychopathic laugh from Arata. Arata, ha 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 ha, me loving her? Don't make me laugh, Surziches, who in their right mind would love a good-for-nothing hitch and heat like your pathetic sister. He said with laughter. At this, Riaz only began to shed tears. This infuriated the man more, but containing his anger he asked. Surziches, what do you gain from this? He asked seriously and angrily. Arata, oh, from the beginning I only wanted one thing, and that was the dragon whales. However, I'm not stupid enough to launch myself into attacking the sekiryuutei head-on, so I decided to draw up a plan. I simply had to make that hitch fall in love with that idiot, and the rest would be easy. I must admit that my plan went better than expected. He said in an arrogant and evil way. At what the black-haired man said, everyone in the room was in shock, while the leaders of the factions along with Ria's family were furious. On the other hand, the exes of the brown-haired man's harem only began to shed tears in torrents, but the one who was most affected was Ria's, who began to lose the shine in her eyes, while endless tears came out of them. From one moment to the next all the guards in the room would launch themselves to attack the black-haired man, however he would disappear from the sight of the guards, only for their bodies to fall to the ground in pieces, leaving everyone present horrified. Arata would appear again, only this time he was in front of the castle door while holding a small green sphere in his hand. Arata. I would like to stay and play with you, but I already got what I wanted. See you later, you idiots. He said in a mocking and arrogant tone. The boy would disappear in a magic circle just before anyone present could do anything. When everyone returned to reality, Surziches ordered a group of elite demons to immediately free Issei Hyoudou from the Grimoire dungeons. The group of demons obeyed the order without hesitation, heading to the place led by the red-haired man who had a serious look, but inside he was broken. With enormous sadness and guilt towards himself. End of flashback. And that brings us to this situation. The group of demons ran towards the deepest floor of the dungeons to free the boy by order of their king. They noticed something as they went down floor by floor, and that was that they had not encountered any guards or staff, which surprised them quite a bit, but deciding to ignore this fact and continuing down. However, when they opened the doors that led to the hallway, they were in for a huge surprise, while being horrified by what their eyes were seeing. All the guards in the dungeon along with the prisoners were dead and their bodies covered in their own blood. Some were on the floor with huge screws going through their bodies, while others were on the walls crucified by the same screws. Before such a scene, the guards were in a state of shock without being able to react. The EMON1, what happened? I asked, coming out of shock but still surprised. The EMON2, all the guards were annihilated. He exclaimed in surprise. The EMON3, the prisoners were too. The EMON4, how the hell did this happen, was it them? Another guard asked. But before anyone else could say anything else, they heard footsteps approaching them and a voice began to speak. No, it couldn't be them, they were all crucified in the same way, none of them had the ability to pierce themselves in that way, this was certainly the work of a third party. Said a voice with a childish tone, but that also conveyed madness. The atmosphere became tense, and the guards began to panic as they heard the footsteps of the mysterious person getting closer and closer. I don't understand it, why would someone enjoy such a cruel and sadistic act? Oh come on, don't jump to conclusions, they were like that when I left, therefore, it wasn't my fault. The person would emerge from the darkness of the hallway, revealing himself to the guards. They would be shocked to see that the person in front of them was none other than Issei Hyoudou, who had elegant clothes, which were covered in blood. He had a large screw in his hand, also covered in blood, but what terrified them the most was that he had an angelic and innocent smile. While his eyes showed hatred and madness. "Bemonio1 Issei Hyoudou, let's go," and shock. Issei, "Oh hello, tell me, how is life treating you?" "Nah, just kidding, I already know everything that's going on outside," he said without erasing his childish smile. "Bemon3 why you did this?" I asked in shock. Issei, "I guess the answer is obvious, isn't it?" he said, changing his gaze to a more evil one with a dark smile. The demon was about to say something, but then a large screw shot out towards him, piercing his neck from side to side, killing him instantly, while a lot of his blood was gushing out, leaving the rest of the guard surprised and turning to see how the brown-haired man had his arm extended with that sadistic expression and smile on his face. "Issei, let's play," he said with a sadistic smile. This left the demons very scared, since the boy emanated a killing instinct so great that it made any other being they had ever seen look ridiculous, but a demon would find courage by stepping forward. "Bemon2, damn it," he exclaimed, throwing hundreds of magic daggers that stuck into the brown-haired boy's body, which fell to the ground with a thud, leaving the rest of the guards shocked. "Bemon2 ha, it didn't turn out to be that big of a deal," he said in an arrogant tone. But the demon would remain silent when he saw how the boy's body slowly began to stand up. "Issei, hey, that doesn't work on me anymore, you can't just stab yourself randomly." As he slowly stood up, you could see his dark silhouette, which had a huge evil smile. "Issei, you must aim properly, at a vital point," he said grimly without erasing his macabre smile. Issei would take one of the many daggers that were embedded in his body, and to the astonishment of the guards, using that same dagger, he would stab his own eye, but the brown-haired boy did not show any sign of pain, he continued to maintain his smile, leaving the guards even more scared. "Issei, all fiction," he whispered in a low voice but was still heard by the guards. What the boy said left them confused, but the data would surprise them to see how from one second to the next, the daggers that were in the brown-haired boy's body would disappear without leaving a single mark or wound, not even his clothes were torn. "Issei, my turn," he said in a dark voice. In the boy's hands 2 large screws would appear, he would without hesitation launch himself to attack the guards who would get into a battle stance ready to defend themselves. One of the guards would launch a blast of demonic power at the brown-haired boy, but he would simply dodge the attack without any problem. The brown-haired boy would disappear from the sight of the demons, only to appear behind one of them and stick the screws into his body, which pierced him from side to side. Bemon3 a scream of pain. Issei, already fed up with his screams, would drive another screw through his heart, killing him instantly. Another guard would begin to throw hundreds of magic spheres at him at high speed, all aimed at vital points of the body, however the brown-haired boy, using a new pair of screws, manages to destroy each magic sphere with a simple blow. The boy, at a monster speed, appears in front of a guard to nail a screw into his neck. The force exerted was such that the body was thrown against the wall, remaining nailed to it with the screw still in his neck. 2 more guards were going to attack them, but then Issei appeared above them, taking their heads with his hands. He would spin in the air still with his hands on the demons' heads, and due to the force exerted, their heads would separate from their bodies, killing them instantly, while their bodies dripped blood looking like a pair of fountains. "Issei, there's only one left," he said amused, turning to look at the last remaining demon. The demon was terrified, his companions had been slaughtered as if it were a game, and now only he was left, and the fact that there were crucified corpses all over the place did not help in the least. "Demon, damn madman," I shout, gathering courage. In a desperate attempt, he would create a small sword made of magic and launch himself at full speed against the boy with the intention of stabbing him. However, being just a few centimeters from him, several very long screws came out of the ground, passing through the demon's body, leaving him impaled in front of a smiling brown-haired boy who watched the whole spectacle as if it were something everyday. The demon simply looked at him with hatred before dying. "Issei, well, at least this time you aimed at a vital point," he said in a calm voice. The brown-haired boy turned his face, showing that the demon's small sword was stuck in his right eye, but he didn't seem to care about anything. He was totally calm and showed no signs of pain. Time skip 6 Mises. Since the brown-haired boy's former friends and girlfriends found out about the incident in the Grimoire dungeons, they were totally shocked to see what the boy was capable of. He had single-handedly massacred all the guards and the most dangerous prisoners of the demonic faction. They had to personally go to the dungeons, since they had not heard anything about the brown-haired boy or the guards. So they went in person to free Issei, but upon arrival they found that little surprise, since then the leaders of the factions had ordered each being belonging to their respective factions to look for Issei Hyoudou, and those who knew or could give any clues about his whereabouts, to tell them as quickly as possible. However, these attempts were in vain. No matter where or how much they searched, they could not find anything about his whereabouts. It seemed as if the earth had swallowed him, but leaving them aside, let's better go see our dear protagonist. With Issei. From what seemed to be a spiral-shaped distinction came our dear brown-haired boy with his typical innocent smile, only this time he had red pupils with a strange black symbol. The chestnut was in a completely black place, there was absolutely nothing in that place that seemed to have no end, but that was not entirely true, there was something in that infinite void, or rather someone. Issei wow, long time no see. He said looking up at a gigantic and imposing being that was staring at him furiously. Issei, it's a pleasure to see you again, trihexa. He said smiling looking at the gigantic and imposing dragon. Chapter 3. Dragon Duel. We can see our beloved brown-haired protagonist in an infinite void in front of nothing but the clothes of the apocalypse, the 666, the trihexa. The gigantic dragon looked with hatred and confusion at the boy in front of him. Trihexa Hyoudou Issei, how long has it been? I haven't seen you since you and the cursed faction sealed me again in this cursed place. He said with a voice that denoted anger and resentment. Even though the boy was in front of one of the most powerful beings of all, he was not even a little bit scared, in fact he still had on his face that innocent smile that now characterized him. Anyone else who was in his place right now would be terrified by the immense aura of power and killing instinct that the beast released, but Issei didn't seem to be affected at all. Trihexa, I honestly don't know what to say, I don't know if you are very brave or very stupid to enter my prison totally alone. He said with a cold but slightly surprised voice. This only caused a slight laugh from the boy, and of course this action further angered the trihexa who was about to crush him with his fist when he looked up and answered him. Issei, oh, I just want to propose something to you. He said simply, slightly drawing the beast's attention. Trihexa. What would that be? I asked seriously and with some curiosity. At this the brown-haired boy only sketched an even bigger smile on his face, which reflected madness and evil. Issei, I want you to join me, I have something very big planned, and it would be a shame if you missed the fun by being locked up here. He said without hesitation. This greatly surprised the beast of the apocalypse, but after a second he began to laugh out loud, which could be heard throughout the place. Trihexa ha, good heavens, you almost killed me with laughter, brat, you must be crazy if you seriously think that I would join you just like that. He said with mockery in his voice. The brown-haired boy just watched as the trihexa continued to laugh uncontrollably until he got tired of his laughter and decided to speak. Issei. How about a challenge? I asked, drawing the attention of the gigantic being. Trihexa, what would this challenge be about? I asked curiously. Issei, you and I will fight, if you defeat me I will break all the seals that imprison you, you will be free, and you will never have to see me again in your life, but if I win you will serve me for the rest of your life. He said with a smile and a dark voice. Trihexa, and what would stop me from killing you here and now? I asked in a threatening manner, trying to intimidate the boy, which didn't work. Issei, if you did that you would be trapped here for all eternity. Let me explain simply. At these words the trihexa was thoughtful, although he had a great opportunity to finally be free from his prison and do what he wants, the mere possibility that he could lose and have to serve that brat infuriated him, but well, at this point he didn't have many options, besides it's not as if he could lose, after all he was the beast of the apocalypse. And a simple human child was not going to defeat him. Those were the thoughts of the trihexa, who finally looked coldly into the cold dark eyes of the young man in front of him and exclaimed. Trihexa, we have a deal, brat, if I win you will break the seals, and I hope to never see your disgusting face again, but if you win I will serve you for the rest of my life, I swear on my pride as a beast of the apocalypse. He said firmly. The chestnut did not doubt for a second the words of the being in front of him, not because he trusted him, but because he did not detect any lie in his words. Issei, well in that case, let's begin. He said with an evil smile. At that around the boy's body began to emanate a large amount of dark energy which began to surround the aforementioned. The only thing that could be seen was his dark silhouette, along with his eyes and mouth that shone in a crimson red. Issei's silhouette was changing little by little, becoming bigger and bigger, to the point that it was equaling the size of a mountain. Not being the same size as the trihexa but still very large, the beast looked at this event in surprise, but suddenly the energy suddenly dissipated, revealing that instead of the brown-eyed boy, there was now a gigantic black dragon with blue touches and wings, similar to those of a bird. Issei, I'm ready, trihexa. He said with a deeper and more imposing voice. At that moment the battle between both dragons begins. Trihexa begins without wasting time, throwing a large fireball straight at Issei. He without flinching uses his wings to begin to fly easily, managing to dodge the attack. He does not waste time and at an enormous speed flies towards the beast, and before it could react, it receives a powerful tackle from the dark dragon that sent it crashing into the ground. But Issei didn't stop there, he opened his mouth wide, and after a few seconds a large ray of magic was fired at the trihexa, who received it head-on, causing a large explosion, followed by a cloud of smoke. As the dust cleared, Issei was a little surprised to see how the beast had only received a few damages, which were regenerating. Issei, oh, I almost forgot your great regeneration, well, that just makes this more fun. He said calmly. Without wasting any time, 666 launches himself at high speed, dealing a strong blow that Issei managed to block without difficulty. Seeing this, trihexa begins to launch several blows that were easily dodged and or blocked by the black dragon. However, the beast of the apocalypse at the same time launches a large fireball that hits his opponent, but this act does little or nothing to provoke Issei, who only smiles at the surprise of his enemy. Issei, my turn. That was the only thing he said to disappear from Trihexa's sight to reappear behind him and give him a strong hammer blow on the back that sent him flying against the ground. However, before it crashed, Issei appeared in front of him and hit him with his tail, raising him many meters in the air. The dark dragon would continue repeating this action a couple more times until finally, with a powerful blow, the trihexa would be sent flying against the ground, crashing loudly. He would not waste time and would get up as quickly as he could. But this action would be of little use to him, since he would watch as a moment of magic, courtesy of Issei, was heading towards him and would imminently reach him, generating another explosion, all under the attentive and amused gaze of Issei, who was calm. The trihexa began to regenerate from the attack, however it would notice how its regeneration this time was slower. This would leave it very surprised, but ignoring this fact, it would divide into 7 different bodies, 1 for each head it had. The 7 beasts launched themselves against their opponent, while 4 of them attacked him hand to hand with blows. The other 3 launched several spheres of fire from a safe distance. Although Issei managed to dodge the blows, he, in a moment of carelessness, received the fireball's full force. Trihexa, believing that he had won, was surprised when he saw the dark dragon totally unharmed. Issei, jejej, nice try Trihexa. He exclaimed in a mocking tone. Quickly the 7 beasts group together and begin to shoot large fireballs. However, this is useless as Issei destroys them all with another burst of high-powered magic. With a quick movement, he grabs one of the beasts by the neck to begin dragging it along the ground. At the end, he throws it with force, causing its body to collide against that of 2 other beasts, which are hit by a blow from the dragon's tail. The other beasts position themselves behind Issei to shoot them with a gigantic fireball, which was countered by his opponent, who again launched a ray of magic, causing a colossal explosion to occur due to the 2 attacks. When the smoke cleared, Issei could see how the 7 beasts had become one again. The dark dragon wasted no time and launched himself at his opponent, giving him a tackle that knocked him to the ground. Once being on top of the trihexa, Issei began to give him blow after blow to the face of the beast of the apocalypse. Each one punch was loaded with more force than the previous one, causing the trihexa's face to slowly disfigure itself. While his enemy's fists were covered by his blood, the beast was doing everything possible to free itself. However, all its efforts were useless. From one moment to the next, Issei stopped hitting him. Before the trihexa could react, he was held by one of his feet by the black dragon, only for Issei to start running at high speed. While dragging the trihexa all over the place, Issei suddenly spreads his wings to start flying while still holding the trihexa. Once in the air, the dragon began to spin on its own axis, giving many turns while continuing to hold his enemy. After having given hundreds of turns, with a beastly force he throws the trihexa against the ground. It descended at a dizzying speed to end up crashing against the ground, causing several of its bones to break, but the thing did not end there. Issei, not satisfied with this, charged again and fired a powerful magic ray that hit the body of the beast of the apocalypse, generating another explosion of great magnitude. The smoke from the explosion was dissipated by a powerful roar from the trihexa, who was more furious than ever. Still wounded, as his regeneration began to act slower, he launched himself at enormous speed against Issei, who was waiting for him with a defiant smile and arms crossed. The trihexa swiped at him with his left claw directly at his face. Unfortunately for him, this attack was dodged without problems. What Issei did not count on was that he received a blow to the stomach from the trihexa. Taking advantage of this, he began to throw a large number of powerful and devastating blows at the dark dragon. He gave him a ceiling hook in the face and then another in the abdomen, followed by an uppercut that made him look up. Then he shot a large fireball that Issei received full on. The beast of the apocalypse was breathing heavily. This had been the most difficult battle he had ever had in his long life. His body was in a deplorable state, full of wounds, and his regeneration was barely working. He began to calm down, believing that he had won. How wrong he was. At that point, a heartbreaking roar was heard throughout that dark place, causing it to tremble. 666 looked on in shock as the figure of that imposing dragon rose above all the smoke, while those bright red eyes stared at him without even blinking. The smoke cleared, revealing the dragon without any damage, leaving the trihexa completely in shock. The Beast of the Apocalypse, the legendary 666, for the first time in its entire existence, was afraid. The power of that boy was monstrous, so as a last result he divided again into 7 different bodies. The 7 beasts began to form a fireball, much larger than all the previous ones, which had almost all its power. Issei, seeing this, only smiled darkly to begin charging a ray of magic with much more force than the previous ones. Trihexa, if this doesn't work, nothing will, the beast said in his thoughts. At that moment, both opponents launched their respective attacks which collided with each other, creating gusts of wind of biblical proportions. Despite the fact that the Trihexa was giving all his effort in his attack, he could notice how his enemy was not showing any effort. The Beast of the Apocalypse understood it at that moment, he had lost. Issei, noticing this, smiled internally to greatly increase the power of his attack, causing it to hit the Trihexa squarely, generating an explosion much larger than the previous ones. The dragon watched calmly as the Beast of the Apocalypse lay unconscious on the ground, his body completely covered in wounds and broken bones. He simply returned to his normal form as he walked calmly down to the ground until he reached the unconscious Trihexa. He would only put a hand on his body, which was surrounded by a slight green glow, immediately healing all the wounds of the colossal being. After a few minutes the Trihexa woke up and the first thing he saw was a calm Issei who was lying in an armchair, drinking a glass of wine with all the peace and tranquility in the world. The brown-haired boy, noticing how he had woken up, fixed his gaze on him, looking at him with a childish smile. Issei, oh, I see you finally woke up. He said without giving it much importance while he continued living off his cup. The Trihexa simply recomposed himself, although his gaze was downcast, something that was noticed by the boy. Trihexa Purdy. He said in a whisper. Issei, sit, and now you have to fulfill your part of the deal. He said smiling. At this the Trihexa only growled under his breath and then sighed heavily. It was obvious that he didn't like the idea of now having to serve that brat, as he called him, but he had sworn it by his pride, apart from the boy having shown himself to be stronger than him, so he had no choice if he wanted to get out of that horrible place. Trihexa, it's okay, Hyoudou, Issei, from now on I am at your service. He said reluctantly, giving a slight bow. At this Issei just smiled evilly to get up while the chair and the now empty glass disappeared, and then he looked at the Trihexa. Issei, wise decision, but before anything else it would be better if you took your human form, after all you can do it, right? He exclaimed, surprising the beast. Trihexa, understood, sir. He said so that his body was surrounded by a faint purple glow. When the glow disappeared, a beautiful young woman of approximately 19 or 20 years old could be seen with dark purple hair, blood-red eyes and porcelain pale skin. The boy looked slightly surprised at the change in the once gigantic and imposing being, and then he put on his usual smile again. Issei, well, now it's time for me to fulfill my part of the deal. He said to snap his fingers. The moment he snapped his fingers, a huge amount of large magical symbols appeared in front of both young people. These from one second to the next broke into hundreds of pieces under the stupefied gaze of the now revealed Trihexa girl and the disinterested gaze of Issei. Trihexa, amazing, she thought in shock as she watched a brown-haired boy easily destroy the seals that held her prisoner. Issei, see, I already know, but we better get out of here, there is someone else I want to recruit. He said, surprising and attracting the attention of the red eye. Issei, alright, let's leave this place. He said so that his pupils turned red again with the black pentagram. The brown-haired boy took the girl by the waist, leaving her with an imperceptible blush, so that later they both disappeared into a kind of black hole that absorbed them in the form of a spiral. In this way they both left that place to never return. Chapter 4. Declaration of War. We can currently see the leaders of the factions of demons, angels, fallen, yokai and Asgardians gathered together, however they had serious looks, and in some cases sadness. The atmosphere that was felt in the room was very tense, making those present uncomfortable. Have you heard anything about Issei-kun's whereabouts? The red-haired Mayu asked sadly. Note. This is how I will start writing the dialogues in my stories from now on. We couldn't find a single clue that would help us find his whereabouts, it's as if the earth had swallowed him up, Azazel exclaimed this time in the same tone of voice. I have searched to see if his soul reached Valhalla, due to his actions it is possible that his soul had arrived there with the other heroes. Old Odin reported. It's the same with us. I've sent hundreds, no, thousands of angels to search for him, but they haven't been able to find anything, and Gabriel's condition is getting worse every day. He spends his time in his room crying and blaming himself. The Overlord of Heaven said heavily. By the way. All the leaders in the room turned to look at the leader of the fallen, his gaze had changed from sadness to one of total seriousness. What's wrong, Azazel Dono? The leader of the Yokai faction asked. The same day that I ordered his release, I finished a device that allowed me to analyze the magical energy on the entire planet, as well as track its point of origin with precision. I did this for future threats of great power. he explained, leaving those present slightly surprised. That's impressive, Azazel, but what does that device have to do with this matter? Michael asked seriously. That's what I'm getting at. Shortly after finishing it, he began to analyze a ridiculously huge amount of RAM magic. Seeing the results, anyone would think it was a very bad joke and impossible. And yet the results kept increasing more and more with each second. He explained in a serious manner, leaving the other leaders surprised. However, the most surprising thing was when I tried to locate that magic, it turned out that my device was showing me that it was in all places and factions. This confused me too much, however I couldn't do anything because my device exploded due to an overload. I finish explaining, now leaving everyone present in shock. That's impossible, there's no way a single presence can be in thousands of places at the same time. Yusaka exclaimed, still in shock. Well, leaving this matter aside, this meeting can now be concluded. Surziches said. The leaders would nod in affirmation, and then each would retreat to their respective faction in a magic circle. But Issei would appear with his new subject with a Kamui in a cave which was full of technology, along with a super competitor. All the technology of the place surpassed the inventions of Azazel himself. Imagine the back of only without Batman's enemy stuff like the dinosaur or the giant coin. Shit, how can you stand traveling like this? He asked as he held his head, recovering from the dizziness. You get used to it and you're surprised when you start to like it. Was the simple answer of a calm brown-haired boy who walked through his cave being followed by trihexa. As Issei walked with all the calm in the world, trihexa looked with some curiosity at the different artifacts that were throughout the cave. She had never seen or understood the technology of humans or other races, because she was locked in the seal of the biblical god for a long time. And will you tell me, sir, who is the other person you want to recruit? I asked, looking at the brown-haired boy. He would simply turn around and look at her with a calm smile, then respond calmly. Now I'll go get him, you wait for me here in the meantime, make yourself comfortable, find yourself a room, there are many in this place, I'll be back shortly, oh by the way, if you dare try to escape I'll kill you, he said the last thing with a dark tone of voice, while releasing a powerful killer instinct, leaving the purple-haired girl paralyzed. You understood, sir? The girl exclaimed in fear. Issei would only stop emitting killing intent to later open a portal with a simple gesture of his hand. He would enter through the portal, which would disappear the instant the boy entered, leaving the red-eyed girl alone. The girl began to walk calmly through the high-tech cave, occasionally looking at the different artifacts that were around the place. After a few seconds, the same dark portal would open in the middle of the room, where Issei would come out with another person. The person accompanying the brown-haired man was a young man with black hair and blue eyes. He did not appear to be more than 18 to 20 years old. He was dressed in a black school uniform and what looked like a white jacket tied to his waist. This was none other than the former leader of the hero faction and bearer of the true longinus, Cao Cao. The purple-haired girl couldn't help but be slightly surprised to see the former leader of the hero faction and calmly approached her lord, drawing his attention, along with that of the black-haired man who looked at her in surprise. So you're the trihexa, I'll be honest, I'm surprised you were a woman, said the bearer of the true longinus with slight surprise. Instantly the girl looked at Issei for an answer, the brown-haired boy took the hint and responded with all the calm in the world. What? I had to tell him that I had the most powerful being in this world at my command, after me of course. The boy said calmly but proudly at the end. Well, now that I'm here, I want you to explain to me what the offer was that you wanted to tell me. Cao Cao exclaimed, looking seriously at Issei. Well, my proposal is simple. I want you to join me and trihexa-chan so that the three of us can put an end to the supernatural. He said as if it were the most normal thing in the world. At what the brown-haired man said, both Cao Cao and trihexa opened their eyes in surprise. Although the purple-haired woman had become Issei's subject, she did not know his goal or his motives, but her line of thought was cut off by the black-haired man's voice between them. Why do you want to put an end to the supernatural, what are you looking for with all that? Cao Cao asked seriously. Issei just put on a more serious look, making those present slightly nervous. The reason is simple, the supernatural is the main cause of all the bad things that happen in the world. He said, confusing those present. Why do I say this? Well, seeing how they changed and betrayed me, I finally realized something. All supernatural beings, especially the disgusting demons, believe themselves superior to humans, seeing them as inferior beings in every aspect, however they depend on them for practically everything. The demons and angels reincarnate humans to add them to their ranks, so as not to become extinct. The fallen seduce them with women so that they support them. The yokai live among them like fleas on a dog. I could continue giving examples, but you already understood. Despite all this, they still believe themselves superior to them, not counting that the only ones capable of using the sacred gears are humans. It is more if we count that these are the faction with the greatest number. If they discover the supernatural world and the sacred gears could end the factions without problems, but I am deviating from the subject. The reason why I want to eliminate them is that they manipulate humans from the shadows, cause most of the conflicts in the history of humanity. What I want is to create a utopia where no one else suffers because of the supernatural. That's why I want to eliminate them. I finish explaining, leaving the purple-haired girl and the bearer of the true long-eye surprised. I can understand your reasons for wanting to eliminate the supernatural, and I must assume that you want me to join you to help you eliminate them, or am I wrong? I asked, receiving a nod from Issei. However, I have a doubt regarding all this. Why did you choose us? I asked extremely seriously. Issei simply smiled before answering. The reason is simple, you want to test the limits of the human being. If you join me and serve me, we will not only eliminate the supernatural, but I will also help you see how far you can go being a human. This way you will see how being a human you will be able to surpass the same faction leaders and even the Great Red. Are you interested? The brown-haired boy asked with a dark smile. Cao remained thoughtful for a few minutes. He could not deny that the offer the boy in front of him was giving him was very tempting. If I agreed to join you, what would I have to give you? The black-haired man asked seriously. Oh, nothing important. The only thing I ask of you in return is your total and absolute loyalty towards me. Issei replied calmly, showing an evil smile and extending his hand, which was surrounded by blue fire. The bearer of the true long-eyeness had to swallow his pride to no doubt shake the brunette's hand while wearing a dark smile. It's a deal, my lord. He said with complete obedience towards Issei. The brown-haired boy could only put a dark smile on his face as he watched Cao kneel in front of him. He already had his subjects, now all he needed to do was take action. Good, now you two listen carefully, I have a plan for what is to come. The brown-haired boy exclaimed, smiling wickedly as his new subjects invited his action. Time skip. We can see the three of them on top of a building in none other than the city where the chestnut was born and raised. It was the city of Kuo. While they were in that building looking at the entire city calmly, they could feel the wind hitting their faces and slightly moving their hair. Issei looked with a dark smile at the city, the people walking through the streets, the birds flying. The families playing in the park with happiness. He looked at all those people and thought that they lived in complete ignorance. They did not even know about the supernatural. They did not know that they were used as puppets for their amusement, but that was about to end, since he would open the eyes of each and every one of those people. Even if for that he needed to get rid of a couple of hundred innocents, that was of no importance to him. After all, now he was a god. Well, let's start the show. Issei said with a crazy smile and then snapped his fingers. Instantly several magical portals began to open in different parts of the city, mostly on top of the tallest buildings. This did not go unnoticed by the people walking down the street, who upon noticing the portals, opened their eyes in total shock. Even the occult club detected a monstrous amount of magical power. As they left the old building they saw in total shock how many portals were opening. However, what left all the citizens immersed in utter terror was that from the portals, a heartbreaking roar of some kind of ferocious beast was heard. Uoirg. Special effects from the year 2060 XD. From the different portals that had appeared throughout the city, hundreds and hundreds of strange creatures began to emerge, which seemed to be wearing some kind of technological armor, apart from having wings which allowed them to fly throughout the city. Everyone present at that moment felt true terror. In less than a second all the citizens began to run terrified, trying to escape from the creatures. However, their efforts were completely in vain. Every person, be it man, woman, child or old man, was killed with total ease by these strange monsters. Obviously the authorities were quick to arrive trying to stop the creatures, which resulted in these same ones brutally massacring the poor officers. Little by little the streets of the city were filling with blood, guts, corpses, limbs and more of the poor unfortunate ones who became the victims of the Brown Army. In the air, you could hear heartbreaking screams that only reflected terror and despair. While all this was happening, Issei and his subjects watched everything from that building with a dark smile. Then the words previously said by their leader came to Cao and Trihexa's minds. Okay, both of you, listen up. This is the plan. First, I will release one of my armies in Kuo City. They will attack and kill people, attracting the Gremory and Citri clans. You can see how Riaz and Sona appeared from two magic circles with their respective retinues ready to defeat those creatures. Obviously these idiots will try to defeat my soldiers, but for obvious reasons they will fail miserably. The little girl could be seen running desperately through the streets looking for her mother. She had many wounds all over her small body. Her eyes only reflected terror and despair, while seas of tears fell down her cheeks. The little girl while running did not realize that a parademon was just centimeters away from splitting her in half with its claws. However, before the monster could touch the girl it was split in half by the ex-durandal of a certain blue-haired demon. The girl would be terrified by this, Zenobia. The members of both clans would launch themselves to fight against the parademons, however they would be overwhelmed due to the enormous numerical difference, which made things very complicated for them, since for each enemy they defeated 3 more appeared to replace it. Hyoudou would try to cut one of the parademons with his sacred demonic sword however, before he could do anything to the creature another one arrived behind him, giving him a devastating blow sending him flying away, all under the Marasa antenna of his entourage companions. Hyoudou, all the members of the Gremory clan exclaimed with concern. Haneko tried to go to her partner to help him, however she quickly had to block with both arms a parademon that attacked her ferociously, dragging her across the ground, leaving a path of rubble in its wake. The lowly Nekomata felt her arm slowly breaking due to the monstrous force that the being exerted on her. Suddenly the creature was split in half by a ray from Akeno, who was wearing her priestess costume. Once finished with the parademon she quickly approached her friend with clear concern reflected on her face. "Haneko, are you okay?" the brunette exclaimed with concern. For a second I thought I was going to break my arms," he said in pain as he stood on his knees holding his arms with a pained expression. "The moment they realize they can't defeat my soldiers. Rias, things are getting out of control, there are thousands of them, you must call your brother, or we will all end up dead, and the city will be destroyed," Akeno shouted in terror and despair to her friend, while helping the albino girl to get up. "They will have no choice but to call for reinforcements, when that happens the real fun will begin, ha 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 ha." Iridide, using a magic circle, would begin to call her brother, while firing large bursts of power of destruction, managing to eliminate some parademons. "Rias, what's wrong?" the Mayu asked in confusion. "Oni-sama, we need you to come quickly to Kuo City, it is under attack by a huge army of strange creatures, whose origin is unknown, come quickly," Rias asked desperately. Issei, seeing and hearing what his former master said, couldn't help but let out a slight mocking laugh. Even after so much time, Rias still depended too much on others to the point that she could do almost nothing for herself. After a few minutes a magic circle with the symbol of the Gremory clan would appear a few meters from both clans that continued to fight with Issei's parademons. Everyone present, including Issei, his subjects, and even the parademons stopped dead when they saw how the Mayu Lucifer and Ria's older brother appeared from the magic circle. Surzich's Gremory had appeared letting out a powerful aura of the power of destruction, while maintaining a serious and intimidating look that would scare anyone except Issei and his subjects. "Hahaha, the fun has just begun," Issei exclaimed with a demented smile as he looked at the red-haired Mayu. Chapter 5. Power of Destruction. The Mayu Lucifer Surzich's Gremory had made an appearance in the devastating Kuo City. He was emanating a powerful aura of power of destruction, while having a cold and intimidating look. Everyone present, including the parademons, remained static looking at the newcomer. In the place a deathly silence had formed until the Mayu's voice resonated throughout the place. "Very well, I demand to know right now who is responsible for this whole mess." It was the shout full of anger and seriousness of the Mayu. His voice imposed respect and power, something that managed to frighten the parademons. Their instincts told them that they could not beat that guy. Iridide was going to say something else, but at that moment a slight and slow applause began to be heard. This obviously caught the attention of both the Mayu and the Gremory and Citri entourages. They turned to see the direction of the sound and saw how the strange creatures made way and knelt, leaving the way free for their leader to pass. The eyes of those present widened in disbelief when they saw a certain brown-haired man in front of them looking at them with the most innocent smile, as if he were a mini 5 years old. However, his eyes reflected an evil, madness and hatred that seemed to have no end, apart from the fact that he was accompanied by Cao Cao and a young woman with purple hair that they did not know. Once the brown-haired man stopped being a few meters from the Mayu, who looked at him in surprise, he finally decided to speak, breaking the silence. "Hello Surziches, long time no see." The brunette greeted in a childish manner under the Iridide's watchful gaze. "Issei-kun, did why you do this?" he asked, hoping she would say no. "Me?" he exclaimed, pointing at himself with his index finger while smiling innocently. "All I did was release a huge army of extremely lethal creatures in this city to make your pathetic sister call you. What they did was not by my order, so therefore, it is not my fault," Issei finished explaining, while raising his hands, without caring about the matter in the least. "Issei-kun, I promise I'll make you reconsider even if I have to break every single one of your bones," the Mayu exclaimed seriously. Yes, whatever you say, but before we start, I want to do something," the brown-haired boy said stoically, then snapped his fingers. In less than a second, different magic screens began to appear in every city around the world, which showed the city in ruins and those present, each town, city, country and continent, adding each and every one of the factions around the planet were watching the screen. The humans were in a state of shock when they saw the huge screens that appeared in the sky from one moment to the next. All the factions on the other hand recognized those who were on these screens being the Mayu Lucifer and the former sekiryuutei. Returning to the destroyed city, Kuo Surziches looked at the brown-haired boy with intrigue. "What did you just do?" the Mayu asked with a bad feeling. "Oh, nothing, Mayu Surziches, Lucifer. I'm simply broadcasting all of this to every city and faction around the planet so that the humans will finally open their eyes and realize their disgusting existence," he exclaimed with mockery and disgust directed toward Surziches. The demons, upon hearing this, opened their eyes in complete shock. The brown-haired boy was revealing the existence of the supernatural to the entire planet. "People of the world, listen to my voice," it was the cry that all humans and supernatural beings heard through the screens. "My name is Issei Hyoudou and I come to reveal the greatest secret in the entire history of humanity. The supernatural exists, and not only that, but they have dared to use and manipulate humans for countless years, but that is over since I, Issei Hyoudou, the one who managed to surpass the gods and become an absolute being, will personally take charge of eradicating each one of those unpleasant beings and guiding humanity to a new golden age of true peace and harmony. And to prove to you that this is totally true, right now I will take care of eliminating one of the most despicable entities that have been related for centuries. I will take care of killing the great Satan." The brown-haired man's voice echoed throughout the planet, leaving all the inhabitants of the earth in complete shock, whether humans or supernatural beings. Upon learning who the red-haired man was, the humans began to look at him with fear, others with hatred and others with disgust. This was simply incredible. Issei was already beginning to gain the support and trust of humans with those simple words. Returning to the battlefield that Kuo City had become, the Mayu looked with extreme seriousness at the boy in front of him. "Riaz." He caught his sister's attention, who immediately set her gaze on him. "I want you, your entourage and that of young Citri to take shelter in the underworld. Now that Issei revealed the supernatural to the world, we won't be safe in the human world," he said seriously. But Oni-sama." The Redeed tried to protest. "Do it now," he exclaimed in a louder, more serious tone of voice. Riaz was surprised by this, her brother had never yelled at her before. She simply nodded her head and was then teleported with her entourage and Sonas to the underworld, leaving the Mayu alone in front of a smiling Issei, who looked at him as if he were a simple cockroach. "Well, before we start I must ask you not to interfere," said the brown-haired boy, referring to his companions, who only nodded in confirmation. "Oh, I also forgot something," he exclaimed to snap his fingers again, and all the parademons disappeared in magic circles. "Now let's begin." He smiled in a macabre way. At that, a golden aura began to surround the brown-haired boy's body. At the same time that several fragments near him began to float, Issei began to clench his fists tightly as the aura surrounding him went from golden to a bright purple color. From 1 second to the next, the aura shot up into the sky, forming a gigantic pillar of purple light, while the city began to tremble due to the immense power that the boy was releasing. Little by little the pillar began to shrink, revealing little by little the silhouette of Issei. Once it was visible, some slight changes in his appearance could be seen. Being that now his body was surrounded by a purple aura, his torso was exposed, revealing that on his thorax there were some bright red symbols, which consisted of a circle. Below this there were 2 small rhombuses, and below these there was a larger rhombus. Also his eyes had changed, being that now the sclera was purple and his pupils completely black. Apart from that, he conveyed an imposing presence that made the Mayu tense. "I'm ready, Lucifer," he smiled sadistically. The battle had begun. From 1 second to the next, Issei would appear in front of the Mayu, giving him a strong blow to the stomach, making him spit out a lot of saliva. Then he would take him by the face and begin to drag the Mayu's body through many rubble, which were destroyed upon impact with the Redeed. At one point, Issei would stop while holding Surzich's face, preventing him from moving. "It would be very easy to eliminate you here and now, however that would not be fun," Issei exclaimed arrogantly. This would give a devastating stop to the Siskin, sending it crashing into a mountain of rubble, becoming buried in it. All the spectators who saw this through the screens were with different reactions. On the human side, they could not believe how that young man was beating up Satan, while on the faction side, they were even more surprised than the humans. But the most shocked were the demons, who watched helplessly as their leader was being humiliated by that human, according to them. There were some who tried to leave the underworld to support their leader, however for some strange reason they could not use magic circles to teleport, apart from the fact that the train that connected to the human world had disappeared. Back to the tomato-headed sissy graped, he emerged from the rubble with several wounds and his suit in tatters. He would regroup to begin generating a huge sphere of power of destruction, to then quickly launch it against a brown-haired boy who stood watching the attack with a bored look. "Sigh, pathetic," was the only thing he said to create a tiny sphere of dark energy and launch it against the Mayu's attack. To the latter's surprise, his attack was reduced to simple particles of light. What is that power?" he asked nervously as he came out of his stupefaction. "Oh, this is just a power called Hakai, that's all you need to know, because soon your blood will cover all the remains of the city." He laughed childishly, smiling like an innocent child. Surziches would feel a great chill run down his spine upon hearing the words of the one he once called friend, but ignoring this, he launched himself against his now opponent, an act that was reciprocated by Issei. Both opponents began to exchange blows, which caused large waves of wind and generated a crater beneath them, which grew larger with each blow that collided. In a quick movement, Surziches would jump away while launching a blast of power of destruction against the brown-haired boy. He simply raised a hand while a sphere of dark purple energy formed. "Akai," he exclaimed, launching the devastating attack. Both attacks collided, however Issei's power began to greatly surpass that of Surziches. Despite the fact that he tried with all his might to repel that power, his efforts were useless. The brown-haired boy's attack hit the Mao's body. Because of this, the entire city would begin to shake wildly, while many huge cracks would appear on the pavement at the same time as a gigantic explosion was generated. Issei had appeared in front of a badly wounded Surziches, who couldn't react when Issei began to land thousands of blows on him at a monster speed. Pray, Uriah. He screamed as he landed thousands of hits on the Mao, while a psychopathic smile appeared on his face. With one of those blows, Issei ended up breaking the Mao's arm, who screamed in pain. "Ai" was the cry that was heard throughout the city, and that, at the same time, everyone heard through the screens. Irideed would recover with difficulty to throw another sphere of the power of destruction at the brown-haired man, but to everyone's surprise he would not move, receiving the attack full-on. However, instead of receiving any damage, the Mao's attack became simple particles of light. This left Surziches in shock. The power of destruction of the Grimoire and Bale clan always destroyed everything without a trace, but this time there was no effect. "You know, this disappoints me," was what Issei said, bringing the Mao out of his stupor. "I really expected more from you. I thought you could make this more interesting, but it seems I was wrong." The boy's innocent smile grew longer, forming a Machiavellian expression. "I expected a lot from the power of destruction of the Mao Lucifer, but this? Is it some kind of joke?" He mocked as the Mao began to tremble with anger, fear and frustration. "Although I shouldn't be that surprised, after all, useless powers for useless people, right?" I finished saying with a macabre smile. At that moment, not only the pride of the Mao received a strong blow, but also the pride of his entire clan. Their power of destruction, of which they felt so proud and believed themselves invincible, was now totally useless. Surziches Lucifer at that moment felt true terror. "Fine, I'm bored of playing with you, Mao. I'll end your repulsive existence here and now," Issei said coldly. The brown-haired boy would put both hands in front of him as he began to charge another devastating attack, only, unlike the others, this one was noticeably much larger and more powerful. "Death, you damn bastard Hakai," he exclaimed with hatred, launching his attack. The Mao was paralyzed, his mind screamed at him to move and dodge the attack, however his body could not move, his legs did not respond. Maybe it was because of fear, maybe it was because of the wounds, or maybe it was because of both things. The attack was getting closer and closer, however, before you managed to hit the redeed, a green blur of speed took the wounded Lucifer out of the range of the attack, causing him to continue until he crashed into a pile of rubble, reducing them to simple particles of light that disappeared into the air. The brown-haired boy was not even surprised by this at all. "I was already wondering when they would arrive, mass," he exclaimed, letting out a heavy sigh as he looked up at the sky, looking at the rest of the mass who were looking at him with a mix of sadness and seriousness. Chapter 6. True Demon King. The four mass were gathered in front of Issei, who deactivated his Hakai mode, returning to normal. He looked at his opponent with an innocent and friendly smile, which did not match the immense killing instinct he released. The latter was of such magnitude that it caused the demons to tremble slightly in fear. They finally arrived, Sarah-chan, Ajuka-kun. Asmodeus-kun, I was beginning to believe that they wouldn't get to play with Surziches-kun and me. The brunette exclaimed with an innocent smile. The tone that the brown-haired boy used was a happy and innocent one, but a mocking tone could be felt when mentioning the newcomers. The demons looked at Issei with sadness, but more so at the black-haired girl with pigtails. "Issei-chan, please stop all this. This is damn madness. Not only have you revealed the supernatural world to the humans, but you're also breaking the balance between the factions. Please let us make up for our mistake. Please, I beg you, leave all this, and let's go back to like the old times, when we were all happy, and you were that kind boy who stole my heart," was what the Mao said. Her voice was brittle, and several tears were running down her cheeks. The boy's hair covered his eyes, he didn't say a word, being in complete silence. The demons thought that the word said by Seraphol would finally make him react. Poor idiots. Suddenly, a killing intent was felt throughout the place that would have terrified even Great Red himself. The mass looked on in fear as Issei slowly looked up, displaying a look of extreme anger and disgust directed towards the pigtailed girl. Like before you say, heh, but how hypocritical of you to say that, you damn hitch. He exclaimed with anger and disgust, surprising the four demons, but more so Seraphil for the insult. If I remember correctly, it was I who freed Riaz from her commitment, it was I who supported them in the battle against Kakabiel, despite the null chances of winning. It was I who always fought by their side no matter the circumstances, and tell me how did they pay me for all my effort and work? He asked, staring at the demons who shuddered at his dark and hate-filled gaze. They abandoned me, they replaced me at the slightest opportunity with a jerk. They locked me in a damn pigsty without even giving me a chance to defend myself, even though I think the one who was wrong was me. The last thing caught the attention of not only the mass, but also of all the viewers globally. I was stupid enough to trust you guys despite your terrible reputation, but I was wrong about one thing: not only are the devils greedy and arrogant, but also every damn supernatural race. Every word that came out of Issei's mouth was filled with hatred and resentment towards every supernatural being. Suddenly a large mass of darkness, as black as the night itself and emanating a slight purple glow, began to slowly cover Issei's body as he continued to speak. That is why I have made the decision to finish off each and every one of you once and for all. From the darkness came what appeared to be two huge whips made of the brightest gold with strange purple symbols. I do not care what you say or your reasons, much less your pain. You can see that from the darkness come out two muscular arms. The era of the supernatural has come to an end. Finally the darkness dissolves, revealing Issei with a radical change of image, being that he now had the appearance of a young man of muscular build, brown hair that reached his shoulders. He now had green eyes, a kind and peaceful smile, which did not match the enormous evil aura that he emanated. I hope you're ready, demon kings. The brown-haired boy exclaimed with a mocking smile. One of the devil's heartbeats would lengthen as he headed at high speed towards the mass, who with a jump, managed to dodge the blow of the weapon, while they watched in surprise as the place where the impact left a large crater. While Ijuka healed Surziches with magic, Asmodeus and Seraphil launched themselves to attack him. The bald man began to launch several magical attacks, while the black-haired woman launched several ice stakes. However, this was useless since Issei, using his devil whips with a few blows of these, destroyed the attacks that were headed towards him. This action left both demons surprised. And that a whip would deliver a strong blow to Asmodeus, sending him flying several meters. Seraphil covered her fists with a thick layer of ice, beginning to launch a great flurry of blows against the brown-haired boy, although his whips would begin to block each and every one of the girl's blows with pigtails, surprising her. Impossible, he doesn't move or retreat from the attacks, instead he's blocking every single one of them, she exclaimed in surprise as she saw Issei's face, which reflected a gloomy face with eyes full of hatred. Admire the power of a god, toxic storm. I exclaim, and seconds later a gigantic magical storm will ravage for miles around, leaving a great trail of destruction. Once the attack was over, the mass emerged from the rubble with several wounds, while Issei smiled innocently at them. Asmodeus would recover and launch a strong blow at Issei, who would simply dodge the blow with a simple movement of his head to give him a strong blow to the stomach with his devil whips and finish him off with another blow to his back, sending him to the ground. The chestnut did not have time to rest when hundreds of ice stakes headed towards him. He would not move in the slightest, waiting for the attack. When the stakes were just centimeters away from him, he whispered something. Ominous nebula. The instant he whispered his technique, a large dome of darkness formed around him as he sent everything in its path flying, causing great destruction and also destroying the ice stakes. Unfortunately, the Mayu Asmodeus was near the boy at the time he carried out his attack, which caused him to end up on the ground seriously injured. This caused the horrified gaze of the other mass and the supernatural beings who watched them through the screens, while the humans on the other hand were happy to see how he, according to them, their savior, was sweeping the floor with those horrible demons. This while some threw insults at the mass, some being like monsters, freaks, eyes, among others. Back to the battles, Issei would look at the badly wounded bald Mayu who was barely getting up. The brown-haired boy, seeing him in that state, would have already made his decision. The first one, he exclaimed, looking at Asmodeus. Esteban headed towards the Mayu with monster speed. Upon seeing Issei heading towards him, he began to launch a large number of magical attacks with the intention of stopping the brown-haired boy. Full counter. That was the only thing the green-eyed man said, so that the Mayu's attacks collided with his whips and were returned to him, only with double the power. The bald man could not react in time and ended up receiving the full impact, leaving him with very serious injuries. The brown-haired man was already in front of the badly wounded Mayu, and with just one of his hands he took him by the neck, beginning to strangle him. The other mass, seeing this, become upset and begin to fly quickly to prevent the brown-haired boy from committing something crazy, according to them. While this was happening, in the underworld the demons watched the battle with extreme concern. DCH, but how annoying. He commented with annoyance to perform the sinister nebula again, sending all the demons flying away. It should be noted that this one still had Asmodeus held by the neck. Issei turned his gaze to the Mayu in his hands to smile in a macabre way. Suddenly his whips changed shape, now being two huge hands with sharp claws. "Let's begin," he exclaimed sadistically. Both claws would take both arms of the Mayu, who looked at this with fear. The claws would begin to slowly pull the demon's arms, who felt how little by little his bones broke and his muscles were torn. He could not help but let out a heartbreaking scream that resonated throughout the world due to the screens. Aya. It was the demon's cry of agony that echoed throughout every city, and although humans enjoyed this, mothers had to cover their children's eyes and ears so they wouldn't see the grim scene. Issei watched this with boredom, so from one second to the next, his whip's devil's claws tore off both of the Mayu's arms, who could only writhe in pain and agony, while jets of blood flowed from the place where his arms once were, but he didn't stop there. The brown-haired boy used Hellblaze, cauterizing the wounds, but at the same time causing the bald man pain. Surziches and the others desperately wanted to go to their partner's aid, however they were still paralyzed due to the pain of Issei's last attack. The boy released the Mayu, who fell to the ground writhing in pain, while he looked at him with boredom. "Your screams are boring," he said with a dark look as one of his whips made into claws dug into Asmodeus's face, who remained static in terror. "Shut up already," was the only thing he said, so that the claw ripped off the Mayu's face, even taking out several bones in the process. Undoubtedly a very grotesque scene for anyone but Issei, who was not affected in the least. "DCH, how disgusting, I got stained with your disgusting blood," he exclaimed in disgust, seeing his clothes stained with the blood of the deceased Mayu, and then turning to look at the other Mayu. Surziches, seeing how Asmodeus was killed in such a cruel way, began to feel enormous fury, at the same time that the whole place was filled with a murderous instinct, directed towards the brown-haired man who looked neutrally at the Mayu. "Do you hate me?" he asked mockingly as he watched Iridid take on his true form. Iridid's appearance had changed, now being a massive power of destruction with a humanoid shape and completely black eyes. The Mayu, in a fit of anger, launched himself against Issei, throwing a large number of spheres of the power of destruction. The brown-haired boy would not even flinch at this, and using his devil whips, would begin to easily block all the Iridid's attacks. The boy would disappear in a blur of speed, appearing in front of the Mayu, giving him a strong uppercut on the chin, making him look up. He appears above the Mayu, giving him a right hook that sent him flying against some rubble. Barely the Mayu recovered, he received a kick in the chest from Issei, which broke several ribs. The Mayu, for each blow he received, felt like his power was weakening. The brown-haired boy was about to give him another blow, but he received a magical attack from the green-haired Mayu. He fell panting with several wounds and scratches, while his clothes were in rags. I guess you want to be the next one to die," he said, smiling in a macabre way. This one would appear in front of the red-haired man to hit him in the face, which sent him flying, bouncing a couple of times on the ground. Issei would not waste time, and using his devil whips, he would grab him by the foot, beginning to whip him repeatedly against the ground. Heavens, he could even hear how the Mayu's bones broke with each impact. He got bored of whipping him against the ground and then throwing him with devastating force into the air. The brown-haired boy appeared above Ijuka and then gave him a hammer blow that sent him to the ground at high speed. He reappeared below the super demon, giving him a powerful radiaso in the back, breaking his spine. The green-haired boy wanted to scream in pain, but he was so weak that he didn't even have the strength for that. Due to the force of the blow, his body was thrown into the air again. Issei began to repeat the synchronicity of attacks using the Mayu's body, as if forcing a ball. Finally, the brown-haired boy hits him with his fist surrounded by darkness, causing the Mayu to crash loudly against the ground, leaving a crater and in the center his body, which had almost 95% of his bones broken. Apart from the fact that his internal organs were damaged and he was on the verge of death. The brown-haired boy would appear next to the dying body of the Mayu, taking him by the neck without any difficulty with one of his whips, looking at the bloody and almost disfigured face of the green-haired boy. "Why, you're a monster," he exclaimed in a choppy voice, with difficulty due to his lack of teeth and with a lot of blood coming out of the corners of his lips. "Oh, you're wrong about something, Ijuka-kun," she said with an innocent smile as she approached the demon's ear and whispered in a dark and macabre tone, "You guys are the real monsters." Issei would drive his fist into the super demon's abdomen, piercing it from side to side, but not satisfied with that, he would use Hellblaze, burning much of Beelzebub's internal organs. Beelzebub would release the demon's body, now a corpse, which would fall dead to the ground with a thud. All of this happened before Surzich's horrified gaze. "No, you're going to die from that," he screamed, completely clouded with anger and pain at seeing his best friend and rival die at the hands of the man who was once his brother-in-law. The Siskin would launch himself in a fit of fury against Issei, who was waiting for him with a calm, but at the same time dark smile. Once they were face to face, they began to exchange an enormous amount of blows at high speed. Each blow generated a current of wind of great power that sent all the debris that were nearby flying. The red-haired demon hit the brown-haired man in the face, however. To his surprise, he was not affected in the least by this. Issei, even with Surzich's fist on his face, counterattacks with a kick which breaks the Mao's arm. He didn't even have time to scream in pain when his enemy began to cause hundreds of cuts on his body with his devil's whips. These ranged from light cuts to lethal cuts that broke his bones into thousands of pieces. After a few seconds, Surzich's had returned to normal, barely staying on his feet. Issei's attacks began to become more fierce, wild and brutal. This showed that Issei was angry. "I gave everything for you and your disgusting race, and how did they repay me? By locking me up in a pigsty and torturing me in 1,000 different ways, and when they got tired of torturing me, they left me at the mercy of the bastards of the prisoners, who continued with their dirty work of making me suffer," he exclaimed angrily, tearing off both of his arms in one go. The Mao didn't have time to scream when he was forcefully grabbed by the neck by the brown-haired boy, who tightened his grip on the Mao's neck. His devil whips turned back into claws and then tore off both of his legs, throwing the Mao's dying body to the ground, who would soon die from the enormous loss of blood. "Remove music." Well, now it's just you, Sera-chan," he exclaimed, turning to see the black-haired girl covered in wounds who was barely standing. The black-haired girl could barely move due to the enormous amount of wounds her body had. Her eyes were filled with tears from seeing how the boy she once loved with all her soul, and who due to her stupidity ended up betraying, killed the other mass in cold blood and with horrible signatures. Her eyes had also lost their shine, being totally empty and dull, looking like a dead person living. "You know, when your gaze changes from hope to despair, it's a real pleasure for me," he exclaimed, smiling wickedly. Issei approached slowly but firmly and intimidatingly towards the exhausted girl, who kept her gaze down and her face shadowed by her hair that usually covered her eyes. "Why, you are no longer the Issei that I have fell in love with, that Issei would never do such horrible things, he already died. Why, you will never be that b-boy that I once loved," she said with a broken voice and her face full of tears. Her tone of voice was empty and completely sad. Serafal, she had completely lost hope. "I couldn't care less what you say, Hitch," he said with disgust as he stood a few feet away from Serafal. The black-haired girl saw how Issei's fist covered in fire approached her in slow motion. She knew perfectly well that she would not survive that last attack, and, even if she did, there would be nothing to do. Issei had killed all the other Mao, as if it were child's play. Now she only had to accept her imminent death. Through Serafal's head her whole life began to pass before her eyes, her childhood, her moments with her sister, when she became a Mao, all the moments when she recorded her magical girl show, but the memories that she treasured the most, and that she would always have even after death, would be the memories where her beloved Issei appeared. From the moment she met him until the fateful day when she betrayed him, she could only smile with nostalgia, sadness, pain, but above all with regret. That was the smile that Serafal Leviathan had on her beautiful face, as her last tear fell out of her right eye and ran down her cheek. "Issei, hey Issei, it's me Serafal. I just want to tell you that I hope that despite everything you're doing, you managed to find true happiness with another person, even though it hurts me a lot to know that that person isn't me, and also I love you." These were the last thoughts of the Mao Serafal Leviathan before the blow from Issei covered in purple fire destroyed her upper body, killing her instantly. At the moment the black-haired girl died, the battlefield fell into a deep silence. All the humans began to celebrate the defeat of, according to them, the evil demon kings, while the demonic faction cried profusely for the loss of their mass, especially the Gremory and Citri clans. Also the other faction leaders mourned the loss of their companions and friends of the demonic race. While with Issei he was slowly returning to normal while keeping his gaze down. Once he returned to his original form, he slowly began to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. The mass are dead," he exclaimed in a psychotic manner and then looked at the screen. "Factions of the entire supernatural world, I'm coming for you," was the only thing he said for the screens around everyone to disappear. Chapter 7. Consequences. A few days had passed since Issei cold-bloodedly killed the 4 great demon kings, and the current situation on a global level could be defined with one simple word: chaos. All the religions of the world began to crumble in a matter of days, especially the Vatican, which dissolved upon learning the truth about the supernatural. All believers in the world of any type of religion stopped praying to their gods. They also began to see Issei as a savior, a hero, a true god. But leaving aside the humans, let's focus on the factions. Things were simply catastrophic. All the mythologies were on high alert, although they couldn't blame them. A threat much bigger than the Chaos Brigade and trihexa had appeared by far, but the one in the worst state was the demon faction. Their leaders had been murdered in cold blood, now they were defenseless to any enemy attack. The underworld after the death of the mass began to be led by the father of the deceased Surziches, Theodicus Gremory. However, the demons did not take this news well. Since the truth was revealed that Issei was innocent, the reputation of the Gremory fell apart in less than the blink of an eye. They went from being adored and respected to being repudiated and despised. The members of Issei's ex-harem had entered depression, but the one who suffered the most was Ria's Gremory. Every night she spent crying, regretting making a tremendous mistake of betraying the only person who truly loved her. She felt an immense hatred and disgust towards herself. Every time she looked in the mirror she could not help but break down in tears while she fell to her knees and said all kinds of insults to herself. The Gremory entourage could not even walk the streets without the other domains beginning to insult them, calling them hitches, luts, bores, among others. Currently all the faction leaders were in an emergency meeting, only instead of Surziches and Serafol, Theodicus Gremory and Sona Citri were taking their places for obvious reasons. The situation inside the room was a disaster. Everyone was shouting at each other, and you could hear the desperation and fear in their voices. They continued like this for a couple of minutes, until a certain Redeed, with his patience at its limit, decided to put an end to this. "Everyone keep quiet," the Gremory patriarch demanded, raising his voice, drawing the attention of the other leaders. They turned to look at him with noticeably serious and even annoyed faces. "How do you expect us to calm down? When because of our stupidity we are in the worst situation in the entire history of the supernatural. I would even dare to say that this surpasses the ancient war of the factions," Zeus shouted with anger almost reaching despair. "That's why we must calm down. Desperation will get us nowhere. We must have a clear mind to think of a way to defeat Issei. As much as it hurts me to say it, he is no longer salvageable." Theodicus said the last thing with great regret in his voice. This statement surprised and saddened those present. However, a certain blonde archangel present there did not take what the man said very well. "That's not true," Gabriel exclaimed with anger clear in his voice, directing his gaze at the demon, who looked at her with sadness and at the same time seriousness. "I know that in the where he is still the Issei who cared for us, the one who sacrificed everything to protect the innocent. He has to continue being there," she said as she fell to her knees, and her voice was broken at the same time as rivers of tears fell down her cheeks to end up on the ground. The present leaders could not help but look at the blonde with sadness and some pity. Michael approaches his sister and helps her up while she wipes away her tears. "Well, I guess what we have to do with the boy is more than obvious. Shiva, god of destruction in Hindu mythology," exclaimed seriously and sadly. Everyone present turned their gaze toward the one proclaimed as god of destruction, who had a serious look. "We must eliminate Issei Hyoudou," he sentenced, leaving everyone present in the room in shock. The leaders wanted to protest, to deny what the god had said. However, they all knew that they could no longer do anything for the boy who was once their friend, and that now through his stupidity he had fallen into darkness. This was his sin. But this clarified, each leader left the room in their respective magic circle, each one leaving with a face that reflected guilt, pain and sadness. "How am I going to tell this to Rias?" the Redeed asked himself mentally, worried about how his daughter might react. But Issei. We can see our super-op brown-haired boy at his base with his two subordinates after the grape lie that Issei gave to the mass before killing them. Right now they were planning their next move. They were in an incredibly luxurious room, even the chairs were marble thrones with gold details. They were sitting around a round table which showed a hologram of the planet Earth with some red dots glowing in certain parts. "I say we attack the Greek pantheon faction. Their gods are not to be underestimated. They possess a very great power that should not be taken lightly," Cao Cao said while having a serious face looking at his leader and the purple-haired girl. At that point the hologram, from one of the points, showed the image of Olympus. Trihexa looked at the image seriously, while the brown-haired boy still had his childish smile almost reaching innocence. "It's not a bad idea, I must say. However, I must decline this option. I say that the best thing would be for us to finish off the dragon god's Ouroboros office and the Great Red. This way we would be getting rid of one of the biggest obstacles that could stand in our way, since we don't know if they could support the factions in this little war we have against the supernatural beings." The beautiful and only girl present elegantly contradicted him while crossing her arms and maintaining a calm but serious expression. "With all due respect, Trihexa-san, I must say that your option, despite your opinion making a lot of sense, I still think that the best thing would be to take care of the Greek pantheon. They are one of the factions with the greatest power in terms of power. By eliminating them, we would be dealing a strong blow to the factions of the supernatural world." I question him as to how he would be the bearer of the true Longinus. The brown-haired boy shook his head in amusement as he watched amused as his two subordinates began to argue about who was right and who needed to be attacked. The brown-haired boy raised his hand, causing the two to remain silent and look at him intently. Upon getting the attention of both of them, he would only stand up as he began to speak. "I must admit that both ideas are good, but I have a better one," he said calmly as the hologram changed, showing his new objective. Seeing the image shown in the hologram, both Cao Cao and Trihexa couldn't help but smile darkly. But first I have to prepare my army. Issei exclaimed as he and his subordinates disappeared in a kind of whirlpool to appear above a large hall which was full of terrifying black creatures with long tails that ended in a sharp point, apart from the fact that they had no eyes, this being their most notable point. When the boy saw his other army, a macabre smile full of evil and madness formed on his lips. Time skip. You can see Issei, with his respective subordinates looking with a gloomy look at a kind of temple while they floated in the air, but this was not an ordinary palace, it was the palace where Shiva, the god of destruction, lived. A macabre smile began to form on the boy's lips as he looked at the palace. This is going to be so much fun, ha 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 ha. The brown-haired boy laughed madly. End of chapter. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.